Good evening and welcome back to KTN Prime. Delighted to have your company with us this evening. My name is Sophia Wanuna. Our conversation this evening focusing on the clergy, religious leaders and the role they play when it comes to governance. Are they speaking truth to power? The political landscape, as we were saying earlier, is hotting up. There's a lot happening from BBI, a general election in about 1.5 years to go. Several by-elections in various parts of the country. But where is the voice, strong, solid voice of the clergy? We'll be playing some of what the provost at All Saints Cathedral, Sami Wainaina, had to say, and has provoked quite some heated debate and conversations around whether, in fact, the politicians and the political class, when it comes to the religious leaders, are being able to put them and hold them accountable. So tonight, for that conversation, I have with me in studio former presiding bishop, CTAM, that is Christ is the Answer Ministries, David Oginde. Also with us is Sheikh Ibrahim Lethome, who's a religious scholar at Nairobi's Jamia Mosque. Gentlemen, thank you so much for being with us this evening. The question that we put out to our viewers, even on Twitter, is whether they think the clergy are playing their rightful role. I'll begin with you, Sheikh. Your understanding first, is there a role to be played? And if so, how are we faring as a country in terms of the two institutions or leadership in both sides?
Yeah, thank you, Sophia. The natural answer to that question is yes, the religious leaders in this country or the clergy have a role to play. And their main role is to ensure that what is in the best interest of the country is done by the politicians, guide the politicians to ensure that they do not endanger the country, enjoin what is good and forbid what is evil. That is the role of religious leaders in this country. So we have that role, yes.
Yeah,
Sophia.
And is it being played rightfully? Or has the ball been dropped, do you think?
Sophia, you know, religious leaders are not homogeneous, and that's why you'll hear sometimes mixed reactions and mixed voices. Some have taken very strong positions. Some of them have taken positions that may be interpreted like they support one side of the political divide as opposed to the others. But others have taken the stand, I would say, that is the stand that is expected of a religious leader, the country and the country first. Because in politics, they just look at their political interests. They do not look at the interests of the country. So my expectation as one of the religious leaders in this country is that, politics aside, we should look at what is in the best interest of this country, and we should not allow politicians to hijack religious platforms for political gains at the expense of peace in this country and harmonious coexistence of Kenyans.
Yeah. And Bishop, I bring you in your thoughts as well on that role from where you see it, and also on the concern that Sheikh has raised of there is no homogeneity. Shouldn't there be, that if the religious institutions, the various, whether it's churches, Muslims, and the mosques, that at the end of the day it's the good, it's unity, it is peace. Shouldn't all be reading from the same script on that?
Should it? Yes, that is what should be. But, you know, religious leaders are human beings just like any other person. And different individuals have a different perspective to the politics of the nation and where things should be going. So there are times when you'll find, therefore, that a particular religious leader takes a particular stand while another one takes a different stand. That is not unusual, especially in a society that is free and people are free to take their position. But as a body corporate, a religious community as a whole, when we come together, we have a common purpose and a common stand. And this is that the religious community in this country has played a very significant role over the period of the history of the nation in terms of trying to get the nation to be at peace, to be harmonious, so that anything that is done is for the welfare and the good of the nation. So when you talk about the religious community as a body, when you talk about the church as a body, that is the position that we have. But as individuals, you will find that there's some deviations here and there. which, as I said, is not unusual.
Yeah, because there are those who say the likes of Alexander Muge, you have Henry Okuli, Getari, and Ndingi Mwananze. Those who are, as you mentioned, played significant roles back in the day, in the second liberation. But that today, as Sheikh was saying, there's been a hijacking. And perhaps elaborate for our viewers who may not be in the know, because we're talking about 80% of Kenyans being Christians, about 10% being Muslims. We've seen the politicians go to the pulpits in the churches. Does that happen in the mosque? Do they also come and execute their politics when you're having your prayers, perhaps?
Let me talk for my mosque, Jamia Mosque, which is the largest mosque in the country and is considered as the Grand Mosque of Kenya. We do not allow politicians to hijack the platform. They come there, they come as worshippers, and if they have a message to pass to the congregation, then it is the imam who is supposed to pass that message. We have taken a deliberate decision not to allow any politician to use any religious ceremony or religious platform to advance their political interests. So that's very deliberate and it's very clear, and we have communicated this to them. So we do not allow that.
But that's unique, you say, to the mosque, Jamia. But does it happen elsewhere?
Well, elsewhere it happens, depending on the influence the politician. As Bishop said, you know, at the end of the day, these religious leaders are human beings. They have certain persuasions, political or otherwise, and we are in a free country, and we cannot gag anybody. There is freedom of expression. But for institutions that have an influence, for example, Jamia is the leading mosque in this country. Whatever decision is taken by Jamia Mosque is usually replicated in the other mosques. But we cannot rule out of a few places where they would allow religious politicians to come and speak in the mosque. And you know, the mosque setup again is a little bit different from the church setup, because usually we go there for the daily obligatory prayers, and actually the program is so strict such that you cannot allow in. It's very difficult to allow a person who is not leading the prayers to come and say anything in the mosque.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Bishop, isn't then that where the church is dropping the ball, that the pulpit now is in some sections being quote-unquote abused, that you have all of these people coming to put out whatever it is their narratives or rhetoric is, and that the church is being seen as to have been compromised?
Well, that is true in a sense, but not totally true, because you'll find that the majority of politicians in this country claim to belong to the Christian faith. And so many times they come as ordinary worshippers, and you cannot stop anybody from coming to church. It is a public space. Everybody is free to come in. And so the balance that sometimes as church leaders we find difficult is between giving recognition to our leaders when they come to our places of worship and controlling what they do thereafter. That is the challenge that many of our Christian leaders have when it comes to managing the pulpit, managing the altar. And I have said here before that it is very unfortunate that a political leader can come into the space where I am the church leader. I am a pastor, I'm a bishop, and I give him chance out of respect to greet the people or say something because he is a leader in the nation. And then that person goes off tangent and begins to say certain things. The normal thing that would be expected of a pastor or of a bishop who is in charge of that particular congregation is to step forward and say, Mheshimiwa, I think what you are saying may not be acceptable. Thank you for greeting the people, and ask them to sit down. But I've seen situations where a politician is going on saying all manner of things, abusing others, insulting others, and the bishop or pastor is seated there as if they are totally helpless. And I think I would want to appeal to my fellow pastors, my fellow bishops. Please, let's take charge of God's house. You are the custodian of that space that God has given you responsibility, and therefore you cannot allow another person to come in there and in quote-unquote defile the altar of God, calling people names, inciting people while you are sitting there seemingly helpless as if there's nothing you can do. So This is a failure on our part as pastors and church leaders, but we cannot stop political leaders from coming into church because they are believers, or if they are not, they are free to come to worship their God in that space, and that will allow them to do.
But you can, and they can be stopped from speaking and addressing the congregation. And I think some would argue that is what needs to happen, because once the person takes to the microphone, especially at this time where there's so much in as far as the political landscape, they could say anything. So I remember at some point Archbishop Sir Pete banning this fundraising in churches, because that's where many say the clergy have been compromised in that, because this person will come with all of this money, so kurudisha mkono, you allow them to then speak. Sheikh, I wonder then for you how this image is redeemed, because there are those who look back and say that voice, that authority has been lost or is waning at the very least.
I think, let me join the bishop in saying that the people who are in charge, the custodians of these religious places of worship, should take charge, and especially now that, let me quote Maraga, the retired Chief Justice, when he said, the drum beats of politics now, they are so loud. I think now the religious leaders should take charge. If I am the imam in that mosque, I should take charge and make sure politicians don't hijack the member, that is the pulpit in the mosque and in the other places. So I think we need to deliberately take charge of our places of worship and ensure that nothing that is going to jeopardize the peace in this country is said in our places of worship, and even outside, actually. Because what I say, Sophia, is this: between the politician and the religious leader, who should be leading the others? Unfortunately, at times we see the politicians now leading the way and the religious leader following. Very unfortunate. For me, we should be firmly in control of this country, because our interest does not stop with the politics. For them, it's 2022 or whatever they support, and after that, their interest will change until its next general election. But for us, it is the future of this country. It is the peaceful coexistence of all the different ethnicities living in this country. It is the future generation of this country. So it is we, the religious leaders, that should be leading the politicians. And when they go wrong, we tell them, Mheshimiwa. Of course, politely, as Bishop said, Mheshimiwa, we think you're overstepping. Like now, the utterances, the hate speech and the rest that is going on, I think they are either Christians or Muslims, and they go to a certain church or a certain mosque. I think our sermons in the church now and in the mosques should be very packaged specifically to address the situation as we are seeing it now and stopping them on the track. Sophia, I'm very worried when I listen to what the politicians are saying and also the silence from the religious leaders. I think it's time now that we should break the silence and tell the politicians, this is the way to do it, and this is the way not to do it.
Yeah, and you've mentioned some of the packaging of what is coming from the pulpit, and I'd like us to play what Sami Wainaina, he's a provost at All Saints Cathedral, had to say on Sunday. It's something that has elicited quite the debate. Let's take a listen.
And these are some of the things that are fueling the hustler dynasty narrative. We have money for BBI, which will only benefit only a few people at the top, the kingpins. BBI will not solve your problems. They only want to benefit at the top so that they can share. We can have money for BBI, but we have no money to build schools that our children learn under the trees. Then the CS talks about it is good for oxygen. We don't lack oxygen even in classes. Our counties cannot receive 15% of the allocation, which is constitutional. Then you want to argue to me that the BBI comes and solves all your problems and gives you 35. If you can't give 15, how do you give 35? Why the lie? Let me remind Kenyans that when your tribal man becomes the president or takes the 5 top seats, as per the proposal of the BBI, you will remain poor. Ask those people, those tribes that have produced presidents, Have they benefited from it? No, they're even poor. Politicians have their agenda to eat and loot this country. What we need, we as Kenyans, are opportunities for employment, roads, networks, markets for our produce, quality health care, and quality education for every Kenyan.
Wainaina, Provost, All Saints Cathedral there, when he delivered the sermon on Sunday. Bishop, is this the kind of speaking truth to power that we need to be seeing more of? That he said it as he sees it, no holds barred?
Yes, there's a time for that, because there's when the nation goes where we are right now, if you remember in 2007, we had a similar kind of scenario where the politicians, in a sense, went amok. They could say anything, they could do anything. There was a lot of name-calling. There was great incitement among the citizens. The consequence is what we saw when the nation actually went up in smoke, literally. Several people were killed and many people displaced, some in IDPs still today. It is very, very sad. And so, as a Christian community, as a religious community, we need to speak out, because when politicians talk, they don't hold anything back. They say it as it is in their own language, and they speak very, very carelessly. I believe that the religious community, the religious leaders, we also need to speak to our political leaders and tell them in no uncertain terms that the direction that they are taking us is going to lead this country into difficulties. So that if should anything happen, we are then not blamed for having not said anything. It is very unfortunate that our leaders are really adults. The majority of them are highly educated people, university graduates. So it is not that they are ignorant of what they are doing. It is not that they are ignorant of what they are saying. So it is very sad that we as shepherds of the people who should be drawing people gently and nicely are pushed to the place where we have to speak the way Provost is speaking. It is very unfortunate, because our leaders are people who know the consequences of their actions, and we should not be the ones pulling them back like you would do for children. So, but if that is the direction they take, then it leaves us as religious leaders with no otherwise than to come out and speak boldly, clearly, and directly to them.
Yeah. Do you think we need to see more of that, Sheikh? Do you think that is what will perhaps help Kenya go from what some are calling a slippery slope?
Yes, Sophia. I think now, more than ever, because as Bishop said, if we are not careful, we might see a repeat of 2007, 2008, God forbid. So more than ever now, religious leaders need to come out, speak strongly, and also do not compromise your position, because you might lose credibility. Because, Sophia, what happens if today I am seen leaning towards a certain political persuasion? Tomorrow, if there is a conflict and the country needs somebody to heal it, I'll not be the one, because I'm already compromised. So religious leaders should speak out loudly with only the interest, what is in the best interest of this country as the guiding principle, and also they should not be compromised. But Sophia, you know, for this country to be peaceful, we have different stakeholders and each has to play their role, including you, the media. Because when politicians utter whatever they utter, they know you people are going to relay to the people. And they know there are people out there who will cheer at them, even when they say stupid things. Sorry for lack of a better word, but people will cheer them. So the religious leaders should tell the congregations, if a politician is inciting people, one group against other, be it a political group against another political group, an ethnic community against another one, then people should stop cheering at them. When somebody says something wrong, all of us should say it's wrong. And the media, I know at the end of the day, it is your balance sheet that matters, but when it is news that is going to incite the country, give them blackout. Believe me.
Yeah. Let me ask you this then, Sheikh, because I'm sure both of you, alongside Bishop, would be advocates of peace.
Yes.
And you have this hustler versus dynasty narrative and conversation debate that's going on in the country. The president has come out to say it's inciting, it is going to cause divisions, it is something that's being pushed by the Tangatanga team. So then I wonder what you both say to that, that if we seek peace, do you also see that that threatens to tear the fabric of this country? Sheikh, I'll start with you on that.
Talking about Tangatanga and the dynasty and the hustlers.
It's whether it's dangerous and it would lead to chaos.
It is dangerous, and we have seen cases of people's vehicles that have been burnt just because somebody is driving a vehicle and another one is riding on a boda. Then people have decided, boda people, those are hustlers. If you're driving a vehicle, they don't even want to care whether you took it on loan or whatever, or is your father's car, or you borrowed from a friend, or is a car hire. You are automatically a dynasty. For me, this is very dangerous. And I don't want to say that the hustlers are right or the other people are. All of any utterances that have the effect of dividing this country, wrong. It can never be right. It doesn't matter who is saying it. Anything that will divide this country. And that's why we're talking about building bridges. Building bridges is about bringing people together. And I'm not talking about BBI. I'm talking about the unity of Kenyans. Call it whatever you want to call. Anything that threatens the fabric of this country, of people living together, then that is dangerous.
Yeah, Bishop, do you agree? Because then you'd imagine on this one, the politicians are running away with the conversation. Don't the flock, the congregants, need to hear from the men of cloth coming out to say that at the end of the day, this is where we stand, this is what we think about this conversation?
Sophia, I recently wrote an article in your newspapers, The Standard, and pointed out this whole discussion about the class division. That's what I call it, whatever name you give it, but it's a division on class. And the consequence of that has had in various nations. The Arab Spring that affected many nations in North Africa and Middle East was about class, and you saw what happened. The consequences are being felt even up to now. I talked about the tribal factor, and as Sheikh has said, anything that divides people has consequences. Just recently, the greatest nation in quote in the world, the United States of America, was brought down in fire. Why? Because of divisions. Because they had taken this very, very strong position, and the politicians, particularly the president, unfortunately, his language was so inciting that mobilized people, and that's when you realize that human beings are human beings. And when leaders speak in a way that incites, that mobilizes, they can do anything. It doesn't matter who they are, whether they are Americans, Germans, Africans, villagers, provided that they believe that what their leader is telling them will get them to the place where they want to go. They can do anything. And we saw United States of America, that has been the place that we have been looking at up to as an example of what democracy should be, has totally been brought down because of the utterances of their leaders. And therefore, I appreciate that politicians are looking for votes, and they will look for it in whichever way they can and in the simplest way they can. I want to appeal to our leaders once again, whether they are in Tangatanga, whether they are in Kieleweke or ODM or whichever BBI, please mobilize your votes in a way that allows Kenyans to live in peace and go about their business and their duties without fighting one another. The fire that is being lit right now could consume. And you see, some of these people that we are mobilizing, when they get moving, even you who started the fire, you cannot stop it. They go beyond your control. And we have seen this in times past. So while this thing can sound very sweet in the ears of our politicians, and especially when crowds gather around them and they believe this is now the way to get to power, I tell you, it's a very dangerous thing.
Yeah.
And therefore, we are appealing. My position as a church leader is to appeal to our leaders because, as I said, these are not simple people. These are educated people. These are highly placed people.
Right.
Great leaders in society. So they know what is right and they know what is wrong. Let them not lead us into destruction.
Into destruction. And perhaps what many would want to see is more of the religious leaders coming out more strongly to say what we're hearing from both of you this evening. As we bring this towards close, Sheikh, at the end of the day, why many of these politicians have sway in the places of worship is because of the money they will bring in. And sometimes we've had even debates of people asking then, shouldn't the religious, the clergy, be concerned about the source of this money when it's been brought to the house of prayer? I wonder where you stand in that, because some have even resorted to calling places of worship money laundering now institutions of the politicians. Your views on that?
Okay. One thing, you know, when a politician brings money to a place of worship, I think they want virtues, to reap virtues from God. And as Bishop said, they are worshippers, you cannot stop them. But then, should the religious leaders be compromised because somebody has brought money to the religious place? And now here, I think that's where, let the bishop talk about the Christian church. Let me talk about the mosque.
The mosque, yes.
In Islam, we are told that the best charity is charity that you give in such a way that your left hand does not know what your right hand has given.
Exactly.
That is the encouragement in Islam.
Yes.
And again, you should not give to God what is dirty. So we tell politicians, if you know that your money is dirty, don't bring it to build the mosque and the rest, because God knows it. So that is what we need to keep on reminding them, to fear God, that God's CCTV is watching them and God knows where they brought that money from.
Yes.
But let them bring money there. But should I be compromised as the religious leaders because he has brought millions here, then he is free to say what he wants? No. Bring your money, but take your position as a worshipper in the mosque.
Yes.
And let me guide the congregants in the mosque.
Yeah. And Bishop, the final question to you. There have been prominent church leaders in regard to 2022 talking about so-and-so is the chosen one. God has said he will be the president. Another one says a different one. So what ordinary folk in church to make of all those kind of pronouncements? When there's this one is saying, "Huyu ndiye amechaguliwa," and then there's a different one. What do we make of this?
Human beings are generally curious. Kenyans, in particular, we are a very curious people. And that's why rumors sell in this country. People want to know the future, and I want to appear like I know what you do not know. It makes me perhaps look better than you are. But it is very unfortunate. We must distinguish, and again I speak to my fellow church leaders, we must distinguish between personal desires and God's voice. I may be very desirous that a particular candidate wins the election, and it is something that I'm very passionate about for whatever reason. And as an individual, I think I have that right to desire my candidate to win. But I should then not go ahead and put words in God's mouth so that I come out and say, "Thus says the Lord. This is what the Lord is saying. So and so is going to be the president, be the governor, be the MCA, or whatever it is." Because in the Bible, one of the things that God hates and abhors is false prophecy. In fact, in the Old Testament, any person who gave a prophecy which did not come to pass was stoned to death. It was that serious.
Right.
The fact that we live in the days of grace does not take away the seriousness of false prophecy. Again, I'll refer to America. There were so many prophets who came out, prominent leaders in the church, and said Trump is going to win the election. It was their personal desire to see him win election. So what then do you say when that does not happen? Do you say God changed his mind? Do you say God's purposes were defeated?
Yeah.
It puts you in a very difficult place as a church leader, because then you have to find explanations as to why this did not happen.
Yeah.
One of the critical verses in the Bible is found in Numbers chapter 23. And it says that God is not man that he should lie,
yes.
nor son of man that he should repent. Has he spoken, and will he not do it? In other words, when God speaks, he does it.
Right.
So when you purport to speak in the name of God, and then it doesn't come to pass, you put yourself in a difficult position. So I would say, if, for example, I say 2022 is coming, and I'm desirous of a particular leader, I wish they could be the one.
Yes.
I can say, you know, as a person, I really wish so-and-so was our next president or our next governor or our... But we are praying that God's will shall be done.
Okay.
Then I'm in a safe place. Whoever comes in, I believe that is God's choice for us.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Bishop. Well said. Sheikh as well. Thank you for being with us this evening here on KTN Prime. Former Presiding Bishop, Christ is the Answer Ministries, David Oginde, as well as Nairobi's Jamia Most scholar, religious scholar, Sheikh Ibrahim Lethome, with us this evening. And thank you for your views. Unfortunately, our time is up. We may not be able to read them, but on behalf of the team that made the show possible, we are very appreciative of your time this evening. Have a good night. My colleague Robinson of Kenya is coming up next with a lot of sporting action. Please stay tuned.